Why don't you love me as I do? Hello, guys. Just waiting for Cienga to join us. As always, it is a pleasure to be with you guys, and as per it's going to be a great conversation. I have admired this artist for a little over a year and cultivated this relationship with Cinga Samson. Um, English pronunciation, of course. Um, and there he is. Just waiting. Hello, Cienga.
Hello, Edward. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for
Let's
having me into your talk. It's quite a pleasure.
Likewise. It's much more of a pleasure for me because your work is so aesthetically rich and
hmm
fulfilling that I
hmm
couldn't help but have a conversation with you
Yeah.
on it, and also getting to know you a little bit. You know, the person behind the art, and
Yes.
making sure that our audiences understand or who you are and your motivations and your
hmm
drives and the amazing things that you're up to.
hmm Wow. Thank you for that. You know, when you're a painter or when you're an artist, it's always fascinating that you would find people outside where you are who are just showing love to you and appreciation and always caught you out of guard. So for me, this is just one of those moments where, um, I kind of really feel special and honored that you are having me here. I am really open to have any conversation, and I'm really quite excited that you could allow me to have this talk with you.
No, it's my absolute pleasure.
hmm
And let's get into the deep thing. So,
Absolutely.
for those of you who are new to In Conversations, I am your host, Eduardo da Costa, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Cinga Samson to a beautiful talk on his work, his drives, his motivations, and so on and so forth. It's just so exciting to finally get the opportunity to chat to you. So the first question really is, how have you been dealing with lockdown?
Uh, you know, um, I think, it kind of felt as if everything has been automatic. Before you know, we're on this point, before you know, we're on another point, and you just have to quickly adapt. So it's been more of a fluid kind of situation where you just, find yourself in this circumstance. After that, you find another one. But what's so incredible right now is that we are at a point where at least the pandemic has dropped down significantly. And even though we are kind of, like I said, we really frightened by this third wave that seems to hit some of our provinces in the country. Um, but besides that, I'm feeling, I've been feeling blessed, to have a moment where um, I could just be with my team, work in such situations, and concentrate on my work. So somehow, as much as all of this has been happening, but it hasn't hindered what I do. It hasn't stopped me from continuing with my journey. So with that, I'm feeling blessed. But having said that, I'm still still worried about the outcomes of our near future. But outside that, yeah, we're all right. I'm all right, and I hope you've been fine as well.
I have been okay. I've
hmm
used we're in the UK and we have just come out of a very stringent lockdown, and it lasted for
hmm
longer than anyone would have expected it. So it's the only, it's practically the only thing anyone can talk about is the fact that we're allowed out in public.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with that said, I want to know a little bit about your thoughts on what's going on within the South African scene.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how you sort of see yourself in that place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, yo, yeah, yeah, that's very interesting because I can always feel like a child, you know, when it comes to the country more specifically, you know, as an artist. I kind of feel like they are child, they are prize, you know, they are. If I like to look at myself as sort of gifted or special, you know, the gift is special, and I always feel like it's not mine. It belongs to the country, you know, or it belongs to the continent. When I think a bit more broader to the world, so it I kind of feel, yeah, that is how I feel in a sense of how I fit to
Mm.
the South African art scene. But it's been very interesting to see different, you know, artists coming out, you know, young artists pushing even more harder than before, seeing that they are more open to the idea of being artists. I've been practicing for 16 years
Oh,
now.
wow.
So, so I have seen a lot of groups of artists coming and, you know, leaving, and then another group, you know, it's as if they go through a strain where others, you know, they stop and, you know, change their route, or others just seems to disappear. But I kind of love the energy that's in right now, you know, slightly more aggressive, you know, slightly more open, slightly more wider, you know, spreading out to the world, not just looking in the country. And
Hmm.
you could meet a young artist that you wouldn't expect much from, but when you hear where they've been within a short time, you know, sometimes you get really surprised, like, oh, that was fast. That's impressive. You know, so yeah, that's how I feel about how the country is right now, outwise, and how I fit in it.
Okay. So the other question I'd love to ask you is, so your works are quite enigmatic, and your signature is the skin color. It's the eyes. It's the fashion. It's the deportment. You know, the way that you cap your figures, or your representations carry themselves in a certain way, and they look you straight in the eye. Would you like to give me, a, or give us more widely,
Um,
the story behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, you know, it wasn't most of the things I put in my work were not. I kind of arrived in them through instincts, you know, and then the thought process afterwards, you know, would be where is that coming from in me, you know, why was the need of that, you know, and sometimes I do a trace, and you find that trace. It sometimes goes back to when I was 5 years old, you know. For instance, there are these flowers I tend to paint, the cannas, where for for some time I always wondered, why am I painting these flowers? Why would these flowers keep on appearing, and why am I so attracted in them?
Hmm.
And to you know, one point, you know, I even ran to I was having a stroll with my girlfriend, and you know, there was this house we were passing, uh, and it has these cannas, and they were just so beautiful. And I kind of, and there were dogs in that yard, so I felt, you know, compelled to just run. I just ran and, you know, jumped the fence, took the key, tried to cut one flower out, left with them, and then you know, when I presented to her, I wasn't giving them to her. They were for me, but I said to her, these look like they look like a beautiful, elegant woman. I really love these flowers. So I started to doing more thinking over the years. Why am I so attracted in them? Only to find out that when I was 5 years old, these flowers were all around my yard, like a hedge, in a yard that we were renting in. And my mother used to, and I remembered, I started to remember, my mother used to pick, my late mother used to pick them. Now, in my memory, it feels it was every day, but I'm assuming it was probably like every third day, you know.
Mm.
But in my mind, it plays as if it was every day. So she was to pick them up and kind of put them in a vase and, have them in the house. And I didn't know it came in, and we stayed in the yard for a couple of years. But we moved on, because we were renting. But I didn't know that would hit me so strong that it would reflect 20 years later, 30 years later in my work. So um, what I'm trying to say is some of the symbols that I put in my work, then they don't come from what I would say I'm communicating with the world. They will come from just being a young child, coming from a typical South African scene,
Mm.
and in a very typical, in being that typical young boy who grew up, in a very ordinary way, nothing special, who happens to have a gift of being able to express himself through painting. So these things sometimes they come out in that way. So the issue with the bag, or the situation with the bag, was that I discovered that, or the fashion brands, I discovered that there's, when you're younger, I was dealing with a situation where I'm young, and when you're younger, you want to be seen, you know,
Mm.
you want to be visible, you want to be understood, you want to appear, and it starts within your peers, but you want more, you want everyone that you come across to see you, who you think you are, to recognize you for um, what what you think is special about you. So sometimes out of desperation, you end up having to buy a new
Improvise.
iPhone, buy a new Gucci bag, and somehow I'm also responding like that in so many things that, oh my goodness, I just wanted, that is just for showing off. And so so I was trying to present that in I was trying to express that, as a young typical African young man, uh, it came, those things come from that point. See me, I'm special. I got something to offer. I am, I'm something that you can love, adore. If we on business week, yeah, I have something. We can talk. If we're on a space, I've got, we're just sharing a space. I'm a young African, or I'm an African. I've got something to share with you that you might know, some other secrets about life that you may not
Mm.
understand. So all of this comes from, just simple things like that, those, or perceptions that, that comes from, see me, so that there comes the fashion brands, and the luxury goods and so on and so on, or the showing off. It comes from that point, because I also sort of that desperate, you know. I also, as a young African, want to be understood and to be recognized, or to be seen, or become, or part of the playing team. I think that's important, and we really need it at this point. So, and it's open for every youngster from the continent to claim it, and I'm comfortable with that. So I'm just expressing it in a visual form without
Mm.
having to state it. So that comes from those points, or from those desperation, from that energy, if I may put it like that.
You- your work can usually be sometimes pigeonholed as being something around masculinity. Do you want to
Hmm.
speak a little bit about how you might be subverting, or you are sort of not subverting, but you're questioning what masculinity is and how it is presented readily, especially within the painted form? or within the painter, the field of painting. Sorry, that's what I wanted to go with.
Um, you know, it's exciting to know that the work really also sometimes reflects more like that. Um, but I will kind of say that the book doesn't. It deals with different conversations that I come across with as I go on with my life. Because some most of the things that I mention in my work, they from personal experiences or things that my mind tends to think about or worry about, all the topics that I bring. So in that case, you would find maybe a journalist who's interested, or a critic who's interested. Well, what am I talking about? What's happening? Then I then express and explain what's happening, and they end up kind of putting that as an umbrella for
For everything,
what the
where
work is about. But in seriousness, is that the work is just about being a typical young African. Some of the things, some of the situations, and which end up being the themes that I would tend to bother about or go through, and at some point when I just turned 30, I started to, my mind was sort of like dealing with, uh, I came up for a very homophobic community, so I was, as a young kid, I was very, I sort of took out, I had a lot of my mother's genes, sort of, took out after her a lot. When I sit like her. When I sometimes, walk or sing, I can't do kind of reflect very feminine,
energy.
porous, posture energy, and so sometimes, this would bother some of the people in my community, and they would really make it difficult for me as a young child. You get a word we call like a morphe, like a faggot sometimes, and this created a complex where I wanted to be tough, and I really come from the township where, so when you want to be tough, you have to be extra tough,
Yeah.
sort of like rough, 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 rough. So I went through that complex, but it was not in my nature, I was something that was forced. So when I was going through the stages of life, I sort of like evolved to a point where I kind of enjoy just the idea that, I am how I am. And this came more clearly when I was 30. And I wanted to do works that sort of question,
Spoke to that.
sort of question that what sort of um, what is what we consider a man. It comes in my thinking, or pose that question, doesn't it come in different forms and ways, and if there were grades and grades, not necessarily there's better or higher one, but doesn't it come in that? Don't we find a different, why are we so uh, only about the men that are strong or intimidating or scary, sort of, because it was something that I was bothered about for 30 years, and I want to rectify it, and especially when there's you want to be, to be addressed as you are, for someone to from coming from that mindset, at that time, to consider to say to you, you are gay, and to say it in a very aggressive way, in a way that they want to spite you, as a young kid, with legal and with just legal understanding, it kind of bothered me a little bit. But later on, I wanted to celebrate that and twist it, and just pose it and push it then, and allow the poses to be more relaxer, more sensual, and just throw it there as if, sort of like to say, it has doesn't matter. it doesn't really matter, and let go. And I knew that it's not just my own experience. It's an experience that there are so many that go through it. And as an artist, so I had a platform to just say, hey, it, you know what? I'm letting go. It's fine.
How do you, so you've just spoken about really important themes, and I just want to reiterate how important this conversation is
Mm-hmm.
from one African to another, having encountered similar issues growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But, my background is Angolan,
Mm-hmm.
and I live in the UK, so it's a little bit different in that sense. But I feel your the burden of representation that you have on your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just like to echo that.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you feel when your work is seen in in a different light to the
Mm-hmm.
way that you want it to be known?
Um, and I'm not. I tried not to be attached to the conversations about the work because they really fluid. They just move with time. One year, this is more interesting, and you'd find that in most articles, this is more dominating. On another year, it's sort of like um, and every time I kind of present a different situation or a different thought, or oh yes, like I say, as a person on the ground, what he feels, who believes that this is not just one experience for one person's experience, that for many, so it doesn't really spark anything for me. But sometimes you would get a writing that is, others like, oh my goodness, I didn't think that, one, especially the positive ones, I don't think that one, there's someone who can think of what I do like that. That somehow does bring a smile. But outside that, not so much.
Okay. So another thing that sort of runs through my mind is the way you complicate the gaze, the way you complicate the way in which sort of in an aesthetic way, the eyes are in essence pointed towards you directly. Would you want to talk a little bit about the eyes, because I feel like they're one of the most enigmatic pieces in your
Mm-hmm.
works. I don't want to demystify the
Mm-hmm.
beauty of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
When I was earlier on in my practice, I've always been bothered by painting eyes. Um, for some reason, they just became too sharp. When if I painted eyes in the work, they feel too sharp.
mm,
So at times I would paint them as the same color as the skin, and but I got to a point where I just gave up, just gave up painting the pupils, more specifically, putting the
yeah.
pupils in the eyes, just like, this is, I don't, and at times I would paint the portraits with closed eyes. I just felt the need for that because I was avoiding to paint the pupils.
Mm.
But when I just stopped, I thought that, oh man, who's gonna love these paintings now, right? And I thought that
Mm.
they look ridiculous, but I can't do the eyes. So I remember having that sort of conversation. I can't do, I don't want to do them, and so it was never a well thought thing. It was more of I was irritated.
Conflict.
It was like I was irritated by how sharp the eye seems to poke outside the painting or the portrait, how they seem to direct it in a way that I don't feel comfortable with. But what I really enjoy about the eyes was that it kind of makes the figure seems to be one with with the space where it is, and
Mm-hmm.
sort of like not sort of it can sense it's not just looking, it's sensing, and it can tell even if it's not point the eyes are not pointing at you, it can tell you are around, and it's one, you the intruder in the space, not the other way around. So this is what I really enjoy about that. For me, there's something very strong and very powerful about that. That it just they just gave it to me, and I really want to feel like that every time I look at the work that I do. Kind of get that energy back. So that's for me the real
Props.
reason. That's my attraction to it. And yeah, so it, that's what keeps on making me do them, if that makes sense.
No, I understand. And another point I wanted to raise was over, goodness, it was in my head, now it's slightly left. Um, but let me work through it mentally. Another point I wanted to raise was the following.
Hmm.
Um, what's your cultural background? Because I think it's very important to understand someone's cultural background, because South African is a very broad term.
Yes, yes.
And within that there are lots of different sort of, how
Cultural
do I put it?
backgrounds.
Yeah,
I got you. What's
exactly.
my catch? I, I'm, I'm, I come from the Ngunis, and I'm Xhosa from the Ngunis, and I grew up in the Eastern Cape, of Eastern Cape province, uh, in a um, in a village called Esibangweni,
Hmm.
and I've lived in different villages and different spaces because um, my father was he was selling insurance, so we would move from one area to another depending where his clients are. So I happen to also to have moved between Cape Town, between Western Cape Province and Eastern Cape Province, and have stayed in different townships. I think I've stayed in 7 townships, and also lived
So you've
in.
seen a lot of South Africa.
Yes, I've slightly been around, and I've lived in lots of different villages. Some I've stayed for like 1 month and I've left. So yeah, in that sense. But I moved to Cape Town where when I was turning about when I was 19. Then this is where I started to work and practice painting. I'm a self-taught. I,
You're an autodidact,
I'm a self-taught
which
who
is even more amazing. I wanted to get to that conversation
and
and,
who
and
was
and ask you what when was your first experience with art with a capital A?
way back. There were magazines where uh, I was when I was way back. I don't remember not having the fascination with art. Never not have. But
Mm.
there are times where I have some, interest in. I remember that we used to buy a magazine, me and my younger brother. I was about 15 at that time, where when I first came account into acrylic paint, for
Mm.
painting, for doing paperworks and so on. So
Hmm.
watercolors, and it only had 2 colors. So you had to buy, but it came in. It had this wooden box, which it was expensive,
Mm.
and but in the box you have to. It came out with 2 colors, and you had to buy another wooden box that will give you the next one color. Um, so I was to save a lot of of my money to buy that. But and then you get that magazine that comes with it, and they'll teach how to do a landscape. So this is where it has I started to my interest getting better. So you have these 2 colors, but you have to create landscape and you have to work with it and turn it into some sort of magic. Only with 2 colors. Um, those were my earlier years where I feel there was a strong sensation that I'm really attracted to this thing, but I never took it as a career. Never took it so serious, because the only idea I had of people who can make a proper living of art were the guys who came from other African countries who used to sell prints of
Mm.
Leonardo, of the Last Supper, and
Mm.
and And this used to bother me because I didn't like what I was saying. Other kids were choosing being a doctor, and I was looking at this and, oh, but this is hard. I can't go door to door. And sometimes, my late mother would buy some and wouldn't want to pay back. Like, yo, this is too expensive. So those guys used to hustle like to get that money back. And this picture for me was not right. This was the only idea I had of what could be possible in terms of making a living with this. And though I kept on having the word that you're an artist, you're an artist, you're an artist. So I wanted to be a doctor. Then later on, I just wanted to be a nature conservatist. But all of that failed. All of that failed, and then I ended up finding an art studio when I was 19, and that's when I just knew when I walked into the studio, this where three artists, painters that were practicing, the Gerald Tabata, Lutando Lopuana, and Kulim Takakya, who belonged in an organization that is responsible for all the Cape Flats artists, which I became part of that organization, and also like a resident in it. And so it was also a center, that space, where all other artists from all different townships that they would come and we'll have meetings, and I'll be there. And I was just 19, and most of them were painters and sculptors. So I had that rich experience of learning, and I had all this attitude and the culture of being in the studio. And what does it mean, like for artists? For there's different schools of artists who think, what does it mean to be an artist? What is a real artist? There's a hot conversation among artists, from where I was, so it great was one of those. You should not be hungry for money, that culture, that grounds you as an artist. And these were not just some of the artists really did well, some did not, but it was just a beautiful community that I really enjoyed. So that is certainly my background, or how I started and where I sort of came from or came about.
What does it mean to be an artist to you?
Before it used to mean everything, when I was, like I said, I had 16 years. It used to mean that this is all I am. This is what I love. This is, how that word, I used to use it because I'm an artist, without really even looking at it, what it really meant. But it for me, it kind of means a certain freedom, a certain, at that time, a certain understanding, or sort of like an opportunity to have a certain, opinion, kind of gives you a ground to express yourself, and this word being an artist, and with all your wacky ideas or your craziness, but this is where you could be accepted and could be understood, and it had to have value. So for me, there was that part in it that I felt it's all. But when I started growing up, turning slightly older, I realized is having a gift to create and make things that you like you had vision, or you had an edge to do. It became more simpler because I also wanted to have to be other things. I wanted to be I want to be a family man at some point. Those things that have more weight now, and I wanted to be more involved also in the community. Share some of my experiences, how I came about, what I've done, and how do I share a little bit of light. And that also started having more weight, as well. To teach a little bit, to share, teach and share a little bit where I can. So it was not just this thing to just work and express yourself. It just, and I started having more interest. And also, to to also to have an interest to deal with myself, kind of, to grow myself in a very inward way,
Mm.
um, other than, just, external, but, to have that growth within me. So that also, became a thing as I was starting to grow up. Now at this point, what is being an artist? um, um, and I'm lost. But I love what I do. It's sort of like there's a title that comes.
You're lost in the
There's a part.
source of the goodness.
Yeah, there's a part of the way it sounds like a job. You know what I mean? It's like there's a part there that's like a job a little bit, because now it's more formula, more structured, and
Let's discuss that a little bit, Cinga. Um,
yeah.
in our pre-interview conversation, you showed me
Mhm.
some amazing work that you're doing, and
Mhm.
I look forward to seeing it when it comes to London next year, hopefully.
That one is for Flag Foundation, and here in New York this year, right about October.
Because you speak about sometimes the obsession with an
Mhm.
image.
Mhm.
I think you work from photography at points, and you also work
Mhm.
from other visual sources. Give us an
Mhm.
idea of the visual sources that you go about dealing with, like magazines
Mhm.
and music, and
Mhm.
give us ideas of that side of your practice, that source that
Mhm.
makes the work
Um,
rich.
Firstly, I have sort of like a sensation, an urge, to talk about something, to deal with something. Not necessarily to talk outside, but to kind of express something that is bothering at that time, or it's a major conversation in my life or internally, and I start having after that I start having flashes of how this thing could play out as a picture, you know. Then from that point, I'm just moving like in point to point quicker. Then after that, I would, have I want to organize a shoot. I'll look for a location, and I'll find that location. Probably, even before I always, when I ever thought I don't know exactly where I could do that, you know, um, or have this sensation I know exactly where it could play well. So there, after that, I organize a shoot, and sometimes roughly over about 25 people in the set, and just people doing different roles. Part of that are modelers from most of them from the communities and the townships that I've grown up in, and usually I would look for people that are just ordinary, just typical like me, and not necessarily this size or this particular this, but just ordinary, just people someone who would pass and even think you've met. But that's what I'm attracted, in the scene. That's what I want. Then from there, I'll have the works, and from there, I'll work from those images, and then produce them, create them to make these works.
This explodes the common held assumption that your work is mostly autobiographical.
Mm, yeah, I guess it kind of it depends on what point someone is looking at it, But for me, it's I, that doesn't. I don't really care about that, to be honest. Whether how it's perceived or what, I'm just being honest with you. Um, I leave that to people to deal with. But if I leave the way, if in the studio, and I feel that I've done this, I've expressed this sensation that I have this edge about, and I can share sometimes these conversations what was happening in me, which is also fulfilling as well, you know. That for me, it is the edge, and sometimes you feel, they get the work differently, and then sometimes like, that's what, okay, I wasn't coming from that point, but I get you, it's fine, as long it's it is you have a thought about it or you have not. Doesn't bother me so much.
It's okay. We have a question for you, Sienga, from the audience. So
Okay.
I'm encouraging the audience now to ask questions in the last 20 minutes of our chat.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, where will you be showing in London, if you're allowed to share?
Um, Uh, I'll, I'll, I'll be having a show in at YCube. I'm invited to have a show there, so that will be the next step that will be happening from the flag show. That's the next show I'll be having.
Amazing. Sienga, do you have any questions for me whilst we wait for the questions from the audience to come in?
Mm.
It'll be interesting to also continue the conversation because my questions are done.
Mhm. Um, if I don't have a real question per se, but what really interested me, what made you feel that it's necessarily that you asked me to have this conversation with you, that you feel that it's, you have to have a conversation with me.
I felt very drawn to your figures. They're very enigmatic.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I feel like I have to continuously. I want to ask you questions. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I want to be present and understand your processes. I want to understand the
Mm-hmm.
feeling that they triggered within me.
Mm-hmm.
And the best source is you.
Okay. 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 Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Because I can read as many magazines that say the same thing that they read somewhere else, where I
Absolutely.
where I can have a chat with you
Yeah.
and understand your work and be more profound in it. So we've had a few questions.
Okay.
Another question is when in Paris, and
Uh, I'm not sure at this point, but I Paris is another space where I have like a lot of friends, and yeah, but we'll see in the future. But right now, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, honestly.
okay, another question is what artists are you interested in watching and following right now?
I'm watching a lot of young artists, and but there's an artist that I really love. I wouldn't say she's not, or he's not young. She's not young. Um, uh, Jennifer Parker. I really love.
Oh yes, I
I'm
adore Jennifer
fascinated by
Packer.
her.
We
Yeah.
share that interest. We share that interest.
So yeah, I kind of love something real there. Something very genuine, less pretentious.
Mm.
And something very soulful that you rarely find, and with little effort. It's not little effort like that, but seemingly with ease. She doesn't struggle. She works hard at it, but she doesn't struggle
Mm.
in having those works. She doesn't feel that she has struggled. That is just an outside, view. But I enjoy that. I enjoy that way, and also something very sincere about her work. Sort of, it is what it is. Forget the flower or the cherry on top. There's something about this. They're just slightly saying that forget the cherry on top. You if you don't like it, it's fine. I love that. I really love that.
And it's not always about the cake either, is it?
You know what I mean?
There's this work that I adore by her. It's called Say
Hmm.
Your Name. It's
Hmm.
in my profile, and
Hmm.
I've posted it a few times, and I've seen her show
Hmm.
at Serpentine. Where have
Hmm.
you come
Wow.
across Jennifer Packer's work? Have you seen it in real life?
I haven't seen it in live, just saw it on Insta, and I've been trying to find her angle, and I can't. I always end up on this like page, those 1,000 like page. I was like, this is not where I want to end up. I want, but yeah, I'm really fascinated by her, and I think that gorgeous and low key, which is amazing. And that's very attractive for me. That's a complete rock star for me.
So, someone's asked the same question practically that I've asked before.
Hmm.
It's how do you feel about the South African scene? And
Hmm.
are you excited for the future?
Um, South African scene is, like I said, it's very coming, and it's we were crossing fingers when the pandemic hit it because we are very we're not so big or known so much at this point, even though we are growing in a very rapid way. But when I went out on the first Thursday of the month, last month, I was so surprised by how many youngsters who are showing works because part of the countries are open. They're showing works, they're exhibiting, it's active. Um, and Cape Town is a small city, so I've been around for, like I said, 16 years. So I've stopped now to, because I want to do work to follow, try to chase everything, So every now and then, but I give myself a chance every now and then to kind of sneak out and see what's happening, around town. Which kid is doing this, you know, um, who is what, and yeah, it's impressive, it's explosive at this point. Um, and
It really
and
is.
and I'm glad, our artists are doing beautiful works, and they're getting paid for it, which is fantastic, and I hope, everyone who loves art and want to have that experience, could, take some time, check out the fresh talent, from this part of the world. It's beautiful.
We have a great South African gallery in London called Goodman Gallery,
Yes.
and I tend to attend a lot of their shows.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm always just blown away by South African talent and moreover the talent that they bring in as a
Yes.
gallery.
Yes.
So we have another question from Leslie Friendridge. And any books you're reading or referencing at the moment?
I won't lie. At this point, I'm not reading any other books, um, and it's something that I've been slightly punishing myself for. But I work from 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. almost every day, um, and with little break from the weekends. But daily, I work like that, and that's sort of like, and it's just an obsession, and I've been doing it for many years now. So some of the things that kind of suffer is having time to yourself, having time
Mhm.
to cut your nails, have your hair, trimmed right, a lot of
Yeah.
things suffer from that. But yeah, and because there's a thing that I feel that, I just, have to be devoted, have to give it my all. I feel like,
And
the
it
world
pays
is,
off.
yeah, I kind of feel like, it's beautiful to be an African youngster at this point.
Mm.
It's a beautiful time to be an African, and I want to give the best I could, and knowing that, especially now, it's growing to be taken more, uh, people are
Seriously.
taking not more seriously, yeah, and I don't want to play around with that, if ever. Uh, I mean, you have such a chance as an artist. You should just, because I feel it's important at this time. I feel like it's beautiful that we could have a painter or painters, coming from this part of, we're not a continent that is praised for its old paintings, you know. Um, we're not, you know what I mean? Just to have some kids, some um, young cats who feel bold enough to say, "Hey, I do pay I'm an old painter." That is for me is very exciting at this point because people are waiting for that.
So they're asking, what do you listen to in the studio?
I listen to a lot of Kwaito. And I listen to. I love Zola. There's a there's a there's an artist, Zola, Zola Seven, and he was very strong when I was his music during the late early 2000 was just hitting strong. So there are a lot of memories, contained within, within his sounds, and they're very hardcore. They have all sorts of subjects, and he just goes straight with them, without
Soften.
fear. Yeah, without fear, and that for me, and it made me feel not that I was, it made me feel radical as a teenager back in those years. So I'm down. That's what I listen to.
Okay. So, guys, unless you have any more questions, I feel like this is a natural point in the conversation where I would like to kind of bring it to an end. In essence,
Mhm.
I have been looking forward to this interview for a very long time.
Mhm.
Singer and I have been speaking for a while, and
Mhm.
this is I've been referring to it to my friends as my birthday treat
Mhm.
because I really enjoy your work, and I these conversations give me life. They really
Mhm.
do give me life, and
Mhm.
it was very interesting to find out about your practice, the way it's developed and grown.
Mhm.
Look forward to seeing you in London.
Ah, thank you, Edward. Thank you for for taking me seriously to that point, that you would want me to to share a word with you about what I do, and just to give me a chance, to share, to give my light, about my practice. It's a very it's it because what we do as artists, we're very sensitive about it, So to have a chance to share it with the world is beautiful. So thank you for that.
No,
Yeah, I'm looking
congratulations
forward.
to you.
I'm
Being
looking forward.
prolific as ever.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking forward to to meet you in London and to actually have a more closer conversation.
Of
Uh,
course.
this has been a treat for me as well. Appreciate. Thank you.
No problem. I'm gonna let you go now, Singer.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Many blessings.
Likewise.
Thanks. Just bye.
Okay, how you're gonna have to do it, I think. I can't seem to. There we are. So, guys, that was a very beautiful conversation. I enjoyed speaking to Sienga on a personal level, and you know, that just blew my mind completely about the work and the person. He's so humble and so welcoming, um, that it really makes one's heart sing. So, guys, see you next month for another In Conversation with a different artist. Um, Lots of love, care, and affection. Goodbye.